So hello everybody, my name is Tom Herr. I'm sales associate for Precision Fine Tackle and also guide and educator for the shop, and I work out of Lancaster, the Lancaster shop. And in a couple months here, it's coming up quick, I'll be spending about a month and a half up in Erie guiding for Steelhead. And the shop asked me if I could tie through video some of the patterns that I found to be successful when I'm up there in Erie. And so there are basically three patterns that I like to use up there, and I found that when I'm up there guiding, I'm usually in my waders 13 hours a day, 6 days a week, and the last thing I want to do when I get back to the hotel is to tie flies that I need. So I tie beforehand to give myself plenty of backup, but I also, if I do need to tie, these flies have to be simple patterns to tie, and they have to be effective. And the other day, as I was filling my boxes, I was tying a pattern that's always been successful out there. It's called the Crystal Meth. It's used with pearl cord braid material, and it's basically tied by making a series of loops over top of on the top of the hook shank of a scud hook. And I was using Semperfli material. It's called Body-n-Rib, and it's basically the same material, if you can see it here, as the pearl cord braid that you find from another manufacturer. And this is a Semperfli material, the card, if you can see it. And as I was using it, one thing I noticed between this material and the competitor is that Semperfli material is not as tightly wound. The exterior isn't tightly as wound around the core, which didn't really matter to me at the time. It still worked fine as far as tying the Crystal Meth. But as I was tying it, as I cut it, the end kind of frayed. And kind of gave me the idea, as you can see here, the end kind of frayed a little bit. It kind of gave me the idea to go one step further and see what would happen if I'd fray that entire string of braid. And I tried it on the competitor's pearl cord braid, and it didn't work. Whereas this, it did work. And what I do, and this is really important, it only works with Semperfli Body-n-Rib pearl cord braid. And there's you have to understand too, there's pearl diamond braid and there's pearl cord braid. The diamond braid does not have a core in the center of it. The diamond braid is just the braiding material that surrounds the core in a pearl cord braid. The Body-n-Rib is a type of pearl cord braid. It has a core in the center of it. So to fray this material, what I do, and it's important, is I reach in. And again, this was totally by accident that I found this, that I did this. But I reached in with my fingertips and I grab a couple strands of the core and a couple strands of the outer material, not the whole thing. And I hold the bottom and I pull, and you can see what happens to it. It opens up. It kind of like frays, if you would. Okay, the material that's frayed. And here's the material that's not frayed. Okay, so I did this and I thought, well, I wonder how that would work tied on a hook and make a series of loops over top of it. And what I found when I was done and I got it wet, well, the fly became translucent in the water. And that's one thing that I found with these flies for steelhead and egg flies and streamer fly patterns, that it really helps and makes them much more effective if they're translucent, or when they're wet, it allows light to enter into them and to pass through them. It makes it much more realistic. So what I did was I used that white that I frayed out, and I also used an orangish color for either side. So I used three strands total, like two of the orange and one of the white, or two of the white and one of the orange. And Semperfli has this Body-n-Rib in all different colors. I've tied it in pink and in red. This is the color here, the salmon or the orange. I'm sure will work very well. So the thread that I use for this fly, in fact, the thread that I use for most of my tying, is Semperfli's Nano silk is a 12-aught thread. You can see it right there. And I really firmly believe in this nano silk. It's the finest thread on the market. This 12-aught thread will bend a size 8 streamer hook, mustad streamer hook. It'll bend it right in 90 degrees. And it's super strong for 12-aught. Much less bulk. It is a silk thread. So if you do tie with it, you do want to use ceramic tubes on your bobbins. Over time, this thread will cut into a metal tube, and the metal tube can also fray if as you tie, as it's coming out the tube and you're tying with it. So to start with, what I do is tie this material in on top, and don't mess with it. Just grab all 3 strands, lay it on top of the hook shank, and tie it in. About a third of the way back is where you want to start it. Take about 4 or 5 wraps. Pick up the excess, trim off. Again, this fly, once you get the material frayed out, it's quite simple to tie. Now, this material, this Semperfli material, does get I'm sorry, not the Semperfli, the Body-n-Rib does get kind of slippery if you tie it on top of the hook shank. So usually what I'll do is I won't do it here, but I'll use super glue, and I'll coat the thread with it, and then use that thread with the super glue to bind the material down onto the hook shank, and that secures everything so it won't spin as you're fishing it, and also as you're tying in. I tie all that material back to the beginning of the bend of the hook shank. Now, when I'm tying any type of egg pattern that I'm making a series of loops, I see a lot of guys, they do use their fingers to make the loops, which is fine. What I found really helps me and make a little bit more precise loops is just use a simple toothpick. And what I'll do is I'll pick the material up, lay the toothpick on top of the hook shank. If you can see it there, reach over, bring it down, 2, 3, 4. Bring your thread in front of the material, and then right there is my first bump. Each successive loop after that will be a little bit larger as you're going through. Don't worry about the colors being on one side or the other, because it'll all blend together. Once you have your thread repositioned in the front of the material, grab the material, make another loop a little bit bigger. And the nice thing about a toothpick is when you're not using it, you can put it in your mouth. 3, 4, bring your thread in front. Keep making your loops. It usually takes about 6 loops to make a sucker, or to make a Crystal Meth, or this one that I'm calling the Fuzzy Meth. Move your thread in front, and another loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, and in front again. As you can see, it's a pretty simple and a very quick pattern to tie. 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be the last one. Secure that material down on the hook shank right in front of the eye, and you can trim off the excess. Bind that material down. Now with the thread that I'm using with this nano silk, I do, whatever I whip finish, I do use two whip finishes on it because it is a slippery thread. It's a GSP type thread, but I do use 2 whip finishes on it just to make sure it's secured. 5 or 6 turns, 4 or 5 turns a piece. 4 or 5, and trim off the thread. And then when this is wet, and all the air bubbles are out of it. As you can see, it does become translucent and you can see through it. And that's key to these flies, to this Fuzzy Meth compared to the Crystal Meth, because the Crystal Meth doesn't allow the light to pass through it, where this, with the frayed material, it actually does.